Hey everybody, today we're going to make some cuts on the Bladerunner using the fence. I'll show you what worked and what didn't work for me. For these test cuts, I'm going to use this piece of 3/4 inch particle board, salvage off of a piece of furniture, I think. So let's just assume that we want to make a 2-inch wide cut out of this larger piece. So what we're going to need to do, I've got a wood cutting blade installed in the Bladerunner. We're going to need to adjust the fence so there's 2 inches between here and the fence, and also 2 inches from here to the fence down here. So if I take a tape measure and I position it at the 2-inch mark. The blade is right at the 2-inch mark. And I move the fence right up against the tape measure at both the blade and at this piece of metal at the back. So that looks pretty close. 2 inches there, 2 inches there. So let's go ahead and make a cut and we'll see how we do. Alright, so I'm going to lower my arm, tighten the back knob. So now the arm is secure. I'm going to set my foot so I'm at the right height, and actually going to put on some hearing protection. Turn on the saw, make our cut. We'll see how we do. Here we go. Alright, so you can see that the piece slid right past this piece of metal, which was what we were looking for. Makes a pretty flat cut. Not too bad, even on particle board. Got a little tear out, but not too bad. So here's the piece that I just cut. And if I take my tape measure and measure it, it is spot on 2 inches. It's a little hard for you to see in the camera, but so the fence is set up right now to produce a 2-inch wide strip as measured by my tape measure. Now let's go ahead and move the end of this fence a little bit that way, and you'll see what happens as I'm trying to cut and this piece of metal gets in the way. So I'm going to move, that's about a 1/16 of an inch. All right, so let's make another cut and you'll see what happens. Alright, so you can see, I hope, the fence is not set up properly, so as the wood is trying to make its way past this piece of metal, it actually hits and it won't slide by. Well, since I've got this cut partially started, what I want to do is just readjust my fence a little bit, move it back the 1/16 of an inch or so. It should allow the piece to go past this piece of metal. Then I can finish my cut. So, hearing protection on, and we'll finish it up. There you go. So the other thing I should point out too is that there are a couple of rulers built into the table. There's one here in the front and one here in the back. So now what I'm going to do is try and use these rulers instead of a tape measure, and we'll get set up for our 2-inch count. So I'm going to set the fence at 2 inches on this end, and likewise 2 inches on this end. The lines are a little bit difficult to see because they're burned into the, or molded into the plastic for the tabletop. I'm going to move this one out just a little tiny bit. Alright, that looks pretty close. So let me move the camera around, we'll make another cut to see how we do. Okay, so what I experienced here is as soon as I started moving past this piece of metal, I started to develop a bind. So what I'm going to do is move this out a tiny little bit. And by tiny little bit, I'm thinking about a 32nd of an inch. Let's see if we can finish. Alright, that got me through. So here's the piece I just cut. If I take my tape measure and measure the width, it looks like it's about a 1/16 of an inch short of 2 inches wide. So 1 inch and 15/16. That's about a 32nd short of 2 inches. So it's got a slight taper to it. And on this end, we're almost 1/8 of an inch too narrow. So that was not a very good cut. So you saw me make a cut using these built-in rulers molded into the tabletop to adjust where the fence goes, to line it up. And as you saw, that cut wasn't really all that great. And I think one of the issues is that the corners on the fence are all rounded over. They're not sharp edges. So when you place the fence down and you're looking at the marks on the ruler, it's hard to tell exactly where the corner is because the corner is rounded. So I suppose you could take, you know, a metal ruler, just this happens to be out of a combination square, and you could use it to kind of find where the corner actually is on the fence, but that starts to feel like just more work than it needs to be. So you've seen me make a few cuts now where having the wood past this piece of metal is an issue. So you might be wondering, what's the distance between the back of the blade and this piece of metal? And I measure it to be about 8 5/8 inches. So what I've learned here so far about making long cuts on the Bladerunner using the fence is that it's pretty critical to make sure that your fence is lined up properly, especially if your workpiece is longer than the distance between the blade and this piece of metal here in the arm. What you're going to need to do is make sure that the fence is lined up so that as you're pushing your workpiece through the blade, your workpiece is going to slide past this piece of metal.